Hello and welcome back to the Measure Pod. I'm Dara, joined by Matthew. Hello, Matthew. How are you doing today?
I'm good, yeah. That was more abrupt than normal.
I'm all
Straight
about
in, got
efficiency.
straight to the point. Yeah.
Well,
Normally you prevaricate trying to figure out what to call me for sort of 5 minutes or
well,
so, but you
well,
were straight in.
I've been doing some self-analysis, and by self-analysis, I mean I've been getting ChatGPT. Shouldn't promote one. I've been using an LLM that shall remain nameless.
Others are available.
Others are available. They may or may not be not as good. Um, and to analyze me and this podcast, and it told me I mean I'm doing it now. It told me I'm long-winded and slow to get to the point, so I've decided to take the feedback on board. So I'm going to be Mr. Efficiency from now on.
It's part of your charm, isn't it? A bit of ramble.
A bit of ramble, a
A bit
suitable,
of.
yeah, exactly. I've got to find that sweet spot. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
How are you?
I'm all right. As is the wonder of podcasting technology. We're basically time travelers. So I think by the time this is in your ears, listeners, I'll be in Spain.
Not on holiday,
No,
to
moving
clarify.
forever. Yeah, forever. Well, I mean, I wouldn't say forever. We might, if for anyone who's seen me, they might wonder about me moving to a sunny climate.
Yeah, I thought you'd have been going further north, really. More
I
than south.
I get confused between north and south. I thought Spain was really cold, and I've committed to it now, so we'll give it a go. But yeah, moving to a small town called El Streccio. I'm not sure if you. No, that's
So you
a
are moving south Spain, which is
yes.
about as hot as it gets.
It gets
in
pretty
Spain.
hot, I hear. Yeah. So anyway, that's my news. Are you moving anywhere exciting?
I exist in a state of purgatory and AI panic,
Don't we all?
mostly. Flop, sweat, and AI panic is my week.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, I've been a bit busy doom mongering. It's my new favorite pastime.
Yeah.
I'll go with pastime and just telling people. Scary. In fact, I don't know if this podcast has parental guidance, and I probably should because I seem to be telling people that robots are going to come and kill us in our sleep. So we probably need some kind of
A
warning.
spoiler for a future episode.
Spoiler slash warning on the podcast from now on. But yeah, there is a lot of AI existential dread or opportunity.
Is that not the absolute perfect segue into the salty news?
I think. Well, it depends because I mean, this week's news might be all about Google Analytics.
It's pretty much all AI.
Is it
again.
AI? Wow, interesting. There's a lot of AI stuff going on, isn't there?
I went and looked at. I actually. Well, one of the things that is in here, which I'll kick this one off then as the first news.
Have they changed
item.
the font color in Google Analytics?
No, well, exactly. But I used, I think last episode, if I get my episodes correct, not to spoil the magic and theatre of all of this, but we do sometimes record the intros out of order. But I think last episode we were talking about the agent tool, the ChatGPT, right? And that it looked interesting, but we didn't have any access to it.
Which is a theme of this podcast. We talk about things we can't actually use.
But then shortly after that, we did get access to it. So I have played with it. And one of the things I did with it was said, go and look at MeasurePod, do a little research about what that is and the themes of it. And then off the back of that, go and find me a lot of news items that the host should cover in the podcast based on what it is. And it pulled out a load that we already covered, which I think it just got from the transcripts. And then all of the Google Analytics ones were very dry. It was very. The most interesting one was the Reddit ads thing that I think we've already talked about. But the rest of it was very, very dry, and it's not as interesting to talk about. I don't think. I mean, it is in the day to day, but
It's and look, it's quality, not quantity, isn't it? There will be we'll talk about the significant updates when they happen. We're not gonna include it for the sake of let's make sure we've got X number of this type of news. We'll go where our investigative journalistic noses take us.
always. I mean, that's why we are here. We are Two professional journalists who just have that instinct to follow our noses.
Yeah,
And
we're gonna win is it the Pulitzer Prize, Nobel Prize? I'm not really sure what you get for journalism. I'm sure there's going to be some prestigious prize coming our way soon for our hard edged. What's the phrase? I can't even do phrases.
don't pull your
No
punches.
pulled
Something was,
punches. Journalism.
yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway, I played with it. It was interesting. We had a look at it last week as well as a company. Mark, co-founder, went to order a pizza with
it
it
worked
with
really
agent
well, didn't
mode.
it?
You see, it did work, but it was just very slow. But my point was that you wouldn't use it to order a pizza, then just stare at it ordering a pizza.
Watch it
I'd
doing
imagine
it,
it's meant to like you go and say, "Get me a pizza," and then go off and I don't know, touch grass or
or
whatever.
eat a pizza while you wait for your pizza to be delivered.
Yeah, to get the hunger for all that time it takes. So it did do it. It was interesting to see it do it. And I'm trying to. I think we said last time as well. Like I'm trying to find the killer use for it
Yeah.
at the minute.
I just love
Um,
the like because it gives you that. And I guess it does want to show you the steps it's going through. And you're right, you wouldn't necessarily have to sit there and watch it. But I just kind of think it makes me kind of smile to myself that it's like the whole point is to take away tedious tasks, and then it's suggesting that you would sit there and watch it do the tedious task on your behalf. As if it somehow then becomes entertainment, where it's like, I don't want to order the pizza myself, but I'll happily sit and watch a computer do it for me.
I mean, that is kind of true the first time you do it because you're like,
It's a
"Oh,
novelty. Yeah, we did. Well,
it's navigating a website."
this was the whole company watching Mark order a pizza. So I guess, yeah, I guess, damn,
Yeah,
actually, it did suck us in.
it was really good. I might go back and watch it again just to get that thrill again.
Wait till the weekend.
It was cool. It is cool. I'm gonna keep playing with it and figure out what to use it for. And then speaking of ChatGPT, ChatGPT 5 is imminent. It is coming.
What did we
There's
know?
been people have seen it like out in the wild, like hidden in bushes and things like that. But they've seen it.
I'd swear that was ChatGPT 5 I just
It's
saw
like,
over there.
or was it a Yeti of some sort? So people have seen it in, I think, the Cursor team, the people who make the Cursor IDE have like used it. Some people saw it. I think it accidentally got released into like a couple of beta versions of ChatGPT. Mark Altman's been out there talking about the fact that it's coming in summer, and then I think it's been now confirmed to be narrowed down to August. A lot of any people who claim to have seen it have been singing its praises, saying how good it is and that it kind of one shots pretty much any task you put in front of it. But we'll have to wait and see what it looks like. You'd think it'd have to be. They've really dragged their feet with putting a 5 on anything. Do you know what I mean? Like they've gone just before 4.0, 03, and then 4.1 and 4.5, and they've done everything in their power apart from call something GPT-5. So you'd hope
No
this is
pressure.
a leap. Yeah, yeah. Maybe they shot themselves in the foot, and it's just going to be actually 4.6. But
Yeah. Is it
people have been crying out for them.
any
Just make it simpler.
timescales? Do we know?
August is all I know.
Yeah.
That's all I know. That's what my sources are telling me.
Yeah. Are you asking
August.
ChatGPT?
Yeah, yeah. When
Trying
you're
to
coming
get it
out,
to, yeah, yeah. When's
My-
when's the new better version of you coming out?
by sources I mean random LinkedIn posts and panic googling. Is normally my journalistic sources. It works. It's always worked so far. So yeah, that will be very interesting when it comes out. I'm not sure. It'll probably come out in stages and to pro users first and with rate limits and all that sort of stuff, but we'll see. And then the other thing that's come out to switch over to Google, well, two Google news items I found. Notebook LM, which I think it's fair to say we're big fans of at Measure Lab. We use it quite a lot. It's a way of sort of chucking a load of documentation of various different formats, like a website, a PDF document, a Word document, a YouTube video, whatever you want, chucking it all into a interface, and then having like you could sort of talk and around that information. You've been able to generate like a podcast off the back of it. So one experiment I did early on was to get hold of a GTM JSON to download, which was just a GTM container. I downloaded the JSON export, and I just uploaded that in and got it to make a podcast around it, and it did, and it was quite interesting in times. So anyway, that's all cool, and they've now released videos, so it can output a video based on what information you've chucked into that thing. And I've been generating a couple today based on old notebooks I had, and it's pretty impressive. It kind of output like this, almost like this slide talk. So it had broken it down into various steps, and then it had sections in the slides, and it sort of generated images, and it seemed to pull out other information outside of that notebook LM to contextualize things. And I'm pretty sure at one point there's an image in one of the documents that have been uploaded, and it had that as like an image in one of the slides that it was pointing to, and a narration over the whole top of the whole thing that was very natural sounding. So it's very cool. So if anybody does have access, like me and other people apart from Dara, it's definitely worth a play with.
I'd love to see it. I
to
just wish I could,
if someone would share one
I just wish I
somewhere.
could see an example of it even. Yeah. Yeah. No, it does sound really cool. And we are big fans of Notebook LM. I kind of laughed a little bit when you said about the podcast thing, because like I used to think you can't fake enthusiasm, but those AI generated voices, you could create a podcast based on anything and they sound so enthusiastic. It's like, on today's episode, we're talking about GTM container 123-Z. Oh, it's going to be a killer episode.
Yeah. Yeah, it does get you engaged. They have it turned to 11, but you can spot it a mile off because they have this very particular way of interrupting each other. And yeah, but it's very impressive.
Well,
We get so used
like
to stuff
us.
so quickly that we are probably AI. I don't know.
Yeah, we are generated. We're just early. Well, I'm a very early model. There's been improvements since I'm rogue. I've got released into the system.
You still got that rambly. You haven't had the ramble.
Haven't quite tweaked that yet.
And what else did I have? This is it's all relevant, right? But Google launches AI search in the UK. Now, I don't seem to have access to this, but apparently it has been released in the UK. I don't know if you've got access to this one.
Nope.
No.
I should have lied and said I do, but no, I don't.
Yeah, you just instantly buckle us.
Yeah, again, I just
question.
can't handle it.
This is, I think we've talked about this before, but essentially it's this long form Google answers to standard Google questions. You go to, and this is in Google, it's not like going to Gemini. You go to Google, you type in your question, and it outputs a more long form piece of long form answers with citations, and then I think other results below it. And yeah, there's a lot of controversy around it because, well, arguably it's sending less and less people to actual sites and just presenting them with the information, which, if your whole business is built around content creation and selling ads and I don't know, affiliate links and things like that based off of that content, it might be a bit of a death nail.
Yeah, and I mean, in a way, Google's business is, or it's built on companies like that then advertising on Google network. So it's going to be really interesting to see. And I read I think that the BBC article that went around, a spokesperson from Google was saying that they haven't yet finalized how they're going to monetize it or how the advertising on that is going to work. And it's going to be really interesting to see how it does end up working, because it's one thing, if the organic web traffic reduces, but if there's less ways for people to advertise against those results, then there's going to be a lot of very unhappy advertisers. And unless we're missing something, Google is still very reliant on that advertising revenue. So
yeah, a lot of very unhappy Google shareholders as well, probably.
Well, yeah,
figure that
exactly. Yeah, they're walking a tightrope, aren't they? But they're smart people. I'm sure they've got a plan.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, is it? That's what when we're talking about Apple being laggards, or is it a cleverly disguised strategy? Google is really betting everything on this. It feels like they've really put all their eggs in this basket.
Well, they all are, aren't they? It's like we talked about Meta as well, and it's like, and it could be one of two things, couldn't it? It could be like, Emperor's New Clothes. Everyone's getting caught up in the excitement of it and throwing everything at it, and it is a gamble, isn't it? You know, these are big established businesses, and if they're going to completely turn overnight to be full in on AI, it better work for them.
And then the last piece of news I've already talked about the fact that you actually got hold of ChatGPT agent mode now, but ChatGPT also released another mode called study mode. Yeah, I think it's designed to, you can give it a subject and it can help sort of plan around how to teach it you. So it's less there to sort of give you the immediate answer and more to sort of construct ways of getting you to come to the answers yourselves. So I asked it earlier how teach me how to be a podcast host.
And it said,
Well,
denied, sorry, this is
well, you
beyond
can already see
my,
the fruits of its labor.
this is,
I'm a
this is
completely different animal.
beyond my computing power. You need to upgrade to the highest level of plan
Yeah,
for this,
I
this
had to
level
pay
of assistance.
£300,
Yeah.
but it asked me, what are you trying to achieve, and what kind of podcasts are you hoping to run and create, and all this kind of stuff. And then he was asking me, what are some of your favorites things, and what kind of episodes you want to do. He kind of just asking me a series of questions where I presume in the background it was creating some sort of plan of attack and curriculum. I didn't get that far because I had to go and record a podcast, ironically.
Okay, so that's the news for today. We've got a guest on today's episode, which we're going to go over to now. So we're joined by Roman Petrochenkov, who's a lead marketing analyst at Carwow. And we have a really good chat with Roman. It's quite it's wide ranging, but it's focusing around his client side perspective of implementing first party data strategy and some of the challenges that come with that. You know, we talk about the usual things you'd expect, like third-party cookies and attribution issues, and we cover enhanced conversions for leads and CAPI. And then Matthew's favorite subject, of course, we talk about the impact of AI, and get some of Roman's thoughts on where he thinks everything is heading.
Yeah, it was a great conversation, wide ranging, and I think definitely somebody that we could bring back to talk about a couple of other interesting subjects down the line. So enjoy.
So, a very warm welcome to today's guest, who is Roman Petrochenkov, lead marketing analyst at Carwow. So, firstly, Roman, welcome to the MeasurePod, and thank you for agreeing to join us.
Thank you very much for having me here.
So, we always kick off, we let our guests introduce themselves so they can do a good job. So, if you want to tell our listeners as much or as little as you like about yourself, a little bit of background, maybe leading up to what you're doing in your current role at Carwow.
So, 100%. It's always the hardest part for me, honestly, because how do you summarize everything? But I started my career in marketing about 12 years ago now. Started doing Google Ads campaigns, Facebook ads, and all of that in agencies, when Google Ads didn't do everything for you back in the days without PMax. About 5 years in, I tried a lot of different roles in analytics. That was back in Russia. I decided to move to Germany, and this is where I started to focus on automation. And an amazing world was open to me because I learned what BigQuery is and how amazing that thing is. And this is where I started to do a lot of Python SQLing around. And I realized that there is a whole role for that. It's called a marketing analyst. And I moved towards that role, worked there for a while. And about 4 years ago, moved to London and work for Carwow now as the lead marketing analyst. I focus on two major things. One is measurement, paid marketing, everything that is about tracking, sending right events, making sure everything works well in bidding, but also everything on the back end for DBT attribution and how data flows to stakeholders.
Okay, so you got quite a wide role, quite a wide remit there, a lot of things to cover.
Yeah, but it's very fun. And I mean, you learn a lot on the job because when I started doing everything like 12 years ago, most of the tools didn't exist. Even 5 years ago, half of the tools didn't exist. But it's really, really fun. And I also have a very technical background, so it's a bit easier for me to connect. But because I both did marketing campaigns and I can code, it's very easy for me to talk to different stakeholders and be a translator for very complex things.
Well, we're probably going to, and I like when we do this. We're probably going to go slightly off on tangents in this conversation, which I think will be great. But there isn't a kind of a main theme that we were going to talk to you about, which is kind of your client side perspective on first-party data strategies. It's somewhat rare that we have somebody from the client side. A lot of our guests tend to be either from kind of tech platforms or maybe people from other agencies or consultancies. So we're really keen to get your kind of insider view on how these things actually work internally on the client side. So, but we will happily go off on little detours because I think we could probably talk to you about lots of different things. But if we kind of at least start around the first party data strategy and get some of your thoughts around how that actually gets implemented in practice versus maybe some of the theory that's out there online.
I was thinking about it. Like it's all start with cookies, right? As some people say, they should be called biscuits, right? Uh, it comes down to realization that third-party cookies were supposed to leave us at some point last year. Then they didn't. Then they did again. Then they got postponed again. But there is definitely a very clear sentiment that third-party cookies at some point not going to be as available as they are right now. And for those that don't know, third-party cookies is a fundamental tracking thing that allows different websites to profile users, understands what they do and everything around tracking essentially. It has an amazing functionality. Like I was thinking about the great examples, understanding what's the difference between the first-party cookie and third cookie for those that don't know. And I thought, well, you come to Amazon, you log in, right? That's Amazon setting something on your browser on the first party context. So it's Amazon doing something for Amazon on the Amazon website. Good. Nobody really minds that. But then if you come to Carwow and want to watch a video on YouTube that is embedded on the page, that video is going to be loaded from YouTube domain on the Carwow page, and then it's going to appear in your history. So that appearing in the history happens because YouTube can read something happening on the Carwow, and that is a third-party context. And though this particular example is very useful because you do want to remember what you watched on different websites, also that comes to all advertising, everything advertising around make that they can profile what you read, what you do, where you go. And well, that's not very safe. I mean, this particular technology is what, 20, 30, 40 years old. So at some point, the privacy and understanding it's very invasive, as people say, is not necessarily great. To my knowledge, we already have Firefox and Safari disallowing third-party cookies by default, right? Which reduce tracking by a lot. But I checked just this morning, Chrome is still 67% of, it's about 70% of all browsers in the internet, and that did not turn it off yet. However, yes, that is about to come. Have you heard about the Google Privacy Sandbox, by the way?
Yeah, well, recently it's pretty hard to tell with Google, but they've, like you said, they postponed it a couple of times. Last I heard, the last postponement was indefinite. But we're still working on Privacy Sandbox, but they kick the can very far down the road. Yeah, apparently. But yeah, Privacy Sandbox looks interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So again, Privacy Sandbox is their very fancy name for, like, it's a very complex thing that I find that basically explains how the cookie is going to work out. But they have two different places where they describe it. There's a website that's called Google Privacy Sandbox. There is a Google Help. They slightly deviate in what they tell. But essentially, the whole idea originally, when they showed to us, not originally, but latest idea that I've seen about a year ago, that when you come to the website and that want to use third-party cookies, is going to pop up another pop-up in front of you. But then if you can't do it for every single pixel, so for example, because it's going to have a separate pop-up for Facebook, separate pop-up for Amazon and everything like this. It's very hard to say whether it's going to happen or not and when it's going to happen, because again, like it was supposed to happen, but didn't. But I think the whole quality of tracking purely on cookie base is still going down a lot because we already lost a huge iOS and Safari world, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? That half of, from a mobile, like 70% of browsers, desktop browsers are Chrome, but you'd imagine that iOS has a much bigger chunk of it with Safari, and they're limiting cookie lifetimes and doing all sorts of stuff to keep their privacy war going. Is it a war? Probably a wrong word, but their fight against, yeah.
Yeah, another very big part of there is the in-app browser. So you can have a Safari, but then you can have a Gmail opening the link that's going to open a Gmail context, and that wouldn't have particularly any storage or retention. Essentially, from purely coming to the point why it's important, it's somewhat of a nightmare nowadays to have cookies purely third-party cookies to track users. So that's why first-party data comes into play with, well, it's a very simple idea, right? We barely change our emails in our lifetimes. They all stay roughly the same. I have the same email I had 15 years ago. And if you can securely share that across the browsers, across the platforms with a consent, that becomes significantly easier to understand what people do and optimize campaigns.
So how do you then? Okay, so we've established why it's important. So what do you, if you're a business, and so this is probably going back a little bit in time for you, but if you're a business who's still maybe at least somewhat reliant on third party cookies, and you realize, okay, we really need to care about first party. What's the kind of process you'd go through? What are the steps you'd go through to kind of move your reliance away from, because you can't, it's not an overnight thing, is it?
It's anything but overnight thing, I would probably say. The biggest thing there that starts even before marketing starts is that you need to position your product and your website the way that it helps you to collect the first party data in the first place, right? If you don't have any way for people to sign up, if you don't have any way for people to stay retained with your business, then there is no reason to share emails. And it sounds very obvious, but on the client side, what happens a lot is when you try to optimize product and the conversion flow, you try to maximize user flow and then remove any barriers. And in a lot of cases, the sign-up flows become barriers. So it kind of comes at exchange of what do you want. And every business needs to understand at which point it becomes very important to retain the customer base. Obviously, it comes with a lot of benefits like CRM management. You can come with CDP platform. Like there's a lot of benefits of using it, but the first real challenge comes at the point that does your product allow it? And if it doesn't, what should be the steps that you should pivot your product to start collecting the first party data? But imagine we have that. Right? Imagine we have a product that collects that. The second big piece is you already probably have third-party cookies. You already have measurement. What I would not recommend is go there like, okay, let's just change it overnight and change all the bidding, every platform, let campaigns go bananas, budget go off the P&L, because that's where really the client side is. You have usually the flow and campaign and budgeting set up way up front. And because you're changing a fundamental tracking thing, it's going to change how campaigns are optimized and how tracking works. You need to be ideally doing it in stages.
How far down that particular rabbit hole are you at Carwow then? Are you at the other end looking back on your glorious achievements, or are you in the midst of those changes?
I think we are very well established. We have done quite a lot of testing. We're using first party data definitely everywhere we can use it. But I think where the real difficulty comes in is first party data sounds like a black box. You collect it and you send it. But then you come to all the details and you realize that every platform has its own specific use cases and specific things you need to collect. One of them that specifically threw me away is if you look at what Google Ads asks you to send in as a first party data through the API upload, it asks you to change Gmail to googlemail.com. And if you miss that line, you kind of throwing a huge bunch of emails and it's not going to be recognized. I'm not sure if it's still there, but half a year ago it was there in the help.
Because it used to be Google Mail, right? Because I think when I first signed up, I had a Google Mail, and then at some point it switched to Gmail. So this must be some real like archaic
buried
system where
in
it's
some
still
code base
expecting,
somewhere.
yeah, that it must be Google Mail. The original format, not this new shortened version.
It's not Hotmail.
No, it's not. So just going, I don't know if this is back a step or not, but so you mentioned earlier about, like, you gave the example of Amazon, and you said, if you go on Amazon, it's in your interest to be signed in, and you're happy about that because you're getting kind of recommendations and you're getting to see what you purchased before. But a lot of businesses don't have that luxury, and maybe there's a point where they capture that email address where if somebody actually successfully purchases something or decides to sign up to a mailing list or whatever. But is there anything you can do around what's happening before that? So if if you've got the type of website where, I mean, this might even be the case for Carwow, where you're going to have a lot of people, you're going to have a lot of tire kickers. So is there anything you can do to try and encourage those users to part with an email address or some other identifiable piece of information? Or do you just have to accept that you're only going to get that identifier once somebody's far enough through the funnel?
I think there are a lot of different layers of that question because you can collect a lot of emails, but there is also specific regulations that you have to follow. And there is certain consent regulations and reasons how you can process and send it. And also in a lot of cases, you not necessarily want to create so many barriers to just collect. Like first party data is absolutely like gold. Like you want to collect, you want to identify as many users as possible. But if the user, let's say, parse with the email, but they don't necessarily become a regular user of your product, they just log, like for example, they sign up for something, but they leave and they do not log in. And then tomorrow they come from a different browser or anything. That doesn't necessarily help you in any way to identify that user. And this is where I start with, like, your product should create incentive for people to sign up for them to actually get some benefit. So for Carwow, for example, when you think about buying car, you really, like, if you buy a used car, you don't have a luxury to pick specific color, tires, place, like price, all of that. You monitor the same way that if you buy like something on Rightmove or Zoopla, you sit there, you monitor what was available, you find the right thing. We have a lot of different flows that help people to make a better choice. But like, again, not every, like some businesses are going to have it a bit harder way. Some businesses are going to have it a bit easier, depending on what the business does. But that reason for people to come back, that's very important.
I think it's time for the first detour into AI, so I'm going to do
Wow,
that.
it's early.
It's I thought it was a bit late. It's normally within the first couple of minutes, but it's related because we're talking about in relation to tire kickers or people coming and perusing these sites and putting in front of people those opportunities and to collect that first party data. What have you seen, like being a company like Carwow that functions in that way, and is that kind of catalogy searching, maybe long tail way of purchasing? How has like AI affected or begun to affect that? Because I can imagine, some of the new things that are coming out with, say, ChatGPT and stuff, where they're beginning to surface results for car purchases or handbags or whatever it may be in the actual chat interface themselves. I can imagine some of that being abstracted away, and you lose the opportunity to collect first party data because they're nicking it over that side. I don't know if you've seen any trend yet, or if it's still early days.
I mean, it's not even Carwow specific. I think this is there's quite a lot of conversation UK specific right now, and it's AI overview from Google. This is where a huge kind of conversation happens. I have been to a very nice meetup with Cloudflare. Cloudflare provides statistics on how much time a system, AI system, crawls your website versus how much time AI sends you a person, and how much difference between one and another. And I don't necessarily remember the exact numbers, so I don't want to quote them incorrectly. But if you look at like ChatGPT and like the kind of AI agents, they are in a very, very red area in terms of they're going to be like 1,000 requests before the user actually comes to your website. But they're very small. So like it's small in the context of most people don't use ChatGPT normally to day-to-day things. They still open Siri, they still open Google and stuff. However, the Google AI overview, that's where you, like a lot of companies, especially publishing companies that basically earn money on people coming and seeing ads, start realizing that people don't necessarily follow after the AI overview, especially when it comes to search terms where like they're more informative and research, like is that car good? Is this good? When it comes to Carwow specifically, because you like it's closer to the point where you also want to see the cars, compare the prices and all of that. it's a little bit easier in that terms, but we definitely see how AI overview starts to take this informative queries and serve that upfront.
So, drilling back into kind of keen to go a little bit into the detail, and you said about the kind of technical process involved in moving to more first party data approach. So, I know it's going to differ depending on what marketing you're running, what platforms you're using, but can you kind of give us an overview of what the kind of steps are and maybe if we start with like what's the kind of minimum kind of viable tech stack that you can use to have a good first party data strategy?
100%. I'm going to start with one thing, though. I have to tell that I'm not a legal advisor. So when you work with the first party data, please consider that you need to talk to a person who can give you legal advice. And there are a lot of regulation depending on the country. Like in the UK, we have ICO, we have GDPR. In Europe, there's different regulators as well. So please be considering of that. Um, but essentially coming to what steps needs to be done, the simplest step, and simplest because most people are going to have an online tracking. So they're going to have some GTM set up. They're going to have some conversion actions coming there, is to enable essentially enhanced conversions. They used to be you sending an email, hashed email, and some other data when the person converts at that point. And now they migrated to a different solution, which is, I think they call it an open conversion event. So essentially, when the person logs in or gives up their email, considering there is a consent given, Google sends that information, Google Pixel sends that information to Google immediately, and that becomes a context of everything else the user is doing on the website. So you don't necessarily send that with every conversion, you just set up one thing. It's very easy to set up. All you need to go is to go to GTM. I hope you have a GTM or any similar tag solution, but and it's called user provided data event or something like this. There are not so many of them. They're just very easy to find inside GTM. And then all you need to do is to expose the email, hashed email in a data layer. This is where it's probably like, oh, all I need to do is this, but how do I do that? This is where you probably need some product or engineering support to help you do that. Unless you're using some built-in systems. Like I haven't worked with Shopify, but I would imagine those systems have it in built in.
Just to chuck out a word of caution there, because we've actually had a couple of clients who use the user provided data function within GTM, and they've come to us with all sorts of problems of like massive drops in users and then single users purchasing hundreds of thousands of products and lots of revenue attributed to individual users. And what it turns out was that they'd set up, in a couple of cases, they'd set up user provided data, and it was grabbing a random other email address off the page, hashing that email address, sending that off to Google, and then Google was seeing that as an individual user, pulling all of those different transactions together, and they're just making these Uber users within GA4s. I think it's in beta anyway right now, that function, but it's just something to be really carefully test it to make sure that it's behaving in your and the data looks correct when you do it, because it can be tricky to unpick and figure out if it does go a bit awry.
I would imagine this happens if you do automatic detection, right, of emails. Yeah. We don't do automatic detection. But it's again, like it will depend on your company. Do you have an engineer? And this is where a lot of like from client side, literally a huge part of it is making sure you talk to people, you build a case internally, you get buy-ins. It's probably half of the work that you need to do to get something adopted. But yeah, if you're a smaller company, you'll have to be careful because you probably will opt in for something easier, but way quicker.
Yeah, I wonder, did at any point we've seen a couple of larger clients now and larger companies that have tried to pretty much remove any middle step from their first party data. So the sort of what you're describing there, you're still sending that data to a third party before then say routing it into BigQuery where you kind of own it in a first party context. It still goes to a third party for an analytics platform and reporting and stuff before it's then extracted. Have you had any consideration of just cutting out the Google analytics piece and just sending the data straight through to a cloud data warehouse to completely own that first party data end to end?
We do that. We do both. Yes. So because we have a production data coming, like so essentially not everything coming when you try to buy or sell a car, not everything happens in the browser. So a lot of this coming from the backend as well. The simplest way to think about it, if you sell your car online, the actual sale is not going to happen in your browser while you're sitting there in front of your computer for 2.5 days. Or for simpler businesses, it's going to be a qualifying lead. So you can get a lot of leads, but only some of them are really good. And if you want to send that data back to Google Ads, you used to use OCI, which is a offline conversion import, which would require you to have a gclead. But now you would probably use a C4 leads, which is essentially you can send either email or click ID or both of them, which now also accepts like so many different click IDs that I can't catch up with them. But yeah.
Matthew obviously gave a few examples of things we've experienced where some of our clients have maybe got things a little bit wrong, but the way you explained it, and I know you, for the sake of the time we have, you kind of simplified it a little bit, but you made it almost sound quite easy to move to enhanced conversions. So did you experience any issues, or is there any advice you would give people for anything to watch out for, or did it have any knock-on effects on your attribution, for example, that you had to kind of unpick? Like, what was your experience of actually implementing it and then using the data that resulted?
It's a very good question. There's a few things like, please stop me when I go too much into detail, but I think depending on how big you are, like if you're a big company, your biggest challenges are going to be to get buy-ins, like the legal approval and product approval, because what you're going to have probably is a website that has 50, like 100 different pages. And the idea that the person is logged in technically doesn't exist as a context on every page. So if your page is serving the information that is not user related in any way, so for example, it's a blog or review, a lot of websites not going to cache information about you being logged in because it's irrelevant. So if you even wanted to track that first party context on that page, you not necessarily can do that. And then you become into this very big, difficult conversation. Whereas if you're a smaller client, your bigger complexity is going to be, you're going to have a smaller, way more understood website, but then building that functionality, making sure that you have GTM, that the data gets there, that legal understands what it is, and measuring that becomes way hard. Like depending on where you are. The thing that I would definitely look after for, so for example, we used to use offline conversions and we switched to EC for leads, which is essentially a very similar concept, but you have additional data and you have more freedom in what you send. To do that, you need to implement this first party user connected event online, right? The moment you implement that, it switches 100% of all your offline conversions to EC for leads because it doesn't actually care where the data comes from as long as it can stitch it. And you can't do the A/B test of conversions there. You can only do pre-post. And the only way we figured that out is because we kind of restarted our test multiple times. We had enough historical data and we saw that the moment we implemented that event, all of our conversion actions, they just collided into single line, collapsed in single line. So if you wanted to measure that, be careful. You can't necessarily measure. You can't do one conversion in the C for leads because the C for leads require that online event. The moment you do online event, all of them become a C for leads. That's probably one of the very trickiest things that I did not expect.
And what about other? So we're talking a lot about Google, but what about other like things like CAPI and the other equivalents? What's your been experience? Because I hear a lot of it seems to, you mention that word to people and you can see the effects of the almost like the PTSD when you talk to people about CAPI sometimes. So what was your experience?
We actually started using CAPI before C for leads only came out last year, right? So CAPI was way, way before that. You asked me in the previous time about attribution. So we have internal attribution, and then we have, we kind of like separate attribution and EC for leads a little bit from how it works. And we're going to CAPI. The complexity comes in is that CAPI works very different to how Google Ads works in terms of how it shares the conversions and what it takes into. One of the things that CAPI allows you to do is to take online event, offline event, and merge them together and basically use both of them to maximize the understanding of how campaign works. Whereas you can't do it in Google. And we internally did not really know what to do with that. Like, how do you measure essentially, it's very hard to measure. Is it good? Is it bad? Another very interesting thing is that Google, like CAPI asks you to send all events within 6 hours. The sooner you can do it, the better. And then do not send events longer than 7 days after they have happened. which again, if you're sending something, a qualified lead or cancellation of orders, like anything that takes physical time to process becomes a big problem. And then you come to Google Ads and it's asked, please do not send us anything within the first 6 hours. We're not ready. That is a very, very interesting thing. Is like you need to look into that. And what we found out is you can't have a universal solution. You have a tool like CAPI, and you try to make it work the best in the context of Facebook. And then you put the measurement of Facebook, like understanding incrementality and MMM and all of that things, as a separate question to how the tool works, which again becomes very, very difficult if you try to merge it all together.
So how, I mean, maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but how on earth do you manage that, the communication of that internally? Because I think if you think back to like the simpler times where maybe people just use something like GA and they pulled all their, last click attribution out of there, and there were differences in terms of how campaigns were run, obviously in the different platforms, but the reporting might have been quite simple. And now you've got so much nuance, and you've got not only all the complexity just around consent and the gaps that might leave in the data, like broadly speaking, but then you've specifically got all of these different ways that all the different solutions work. I mean, that must be, I can only imagine what that must be like for you trying to communicate that in a way that could be understood by different types of stakeholders who will have different levels of knowledge about how all of this works.
It is a challenge, and it's a challenge both ways because you're trying to come there and say, "Hey, I have an amazing tool." Where like this thing is amazing, and they're like, "Yeah, but we have targets, we have everything." And if you ever like switch the big campaign in Google Ads to a new bidding strategy, it's never a smooth sailing. It's like, is it going to work? Is it not going to work? What's going to happen tomorrow? Like it's a very, very scary thing. And being this like building the right communication and explaining people why you do certain things is very important. That the first time we switched to value-based bidding, it was a level of communication. Like you talk to the team, we combine together, like together with marketing efforts, like we want to do that. Okay, do we need to get on board? How do we do that? And the same happens with pretty much every iteration. Because again, like switching bidding, especially when you have everything working, in a way, it's like you are trying to change a tire while you're driving far. Like it's very difficult. But it's also difficult for us from perspective. You come there and like, okay, there is this amazing thing came out. Let's say CAPI or if you see for this anything, like how do you pray? How do you say I wanted to spend 3-4 weeks of work understanding it, building your pipeline, building a test to measure the impact of it, where there is no real understanding whether it's going to be any benefit to your business? Um, Answer for that, honestly, I don't know. You just try to find time and build cases together.
And then I guess a follow on or a related question. So there's internally communicating it, but then also in terms of like testing, how it must add a lot of complexity when you're trying to test, because you're not just testing the site or the app. You're testing campaigns with different that are tracked and measured in different ways. And I mean, it's a very similar question, but in terms of how you actually run experimentation, is there a kind of way you navigate through all of these different complexities and nuances with the different platforms, and even just in terms of measuring experiments in general, when you've got all of the potential gaps in the data around consent?
It's again, it all comes down to really like you have to know platform really well. Like you need to understand what's happening behind the hood or under the hood, like what's happening in there to build a good measurement plan. When we look at the Google Ads, for example, with Google Ads, it's somewhat straightforward in terms of how we set it up. We have a quite complex pipeline. I'm not gonna lie, I'm getting lost sometimes in it because we try to connect both online and offline together and then measure it. But then the benefit of it, you create a new conversion action, and then you can compare existing conversion action to a new conversion action, and you don't need to switch anything to it. You can see breakdown campaign by campaign. And then you need to build a story. So for example, for receive for leads, one of the things we have seen is the moment you turn it on, it starts using first party data. It shifts about 5% of our conversions between different campaigns. And most of that shifts were like PMAX got quite a nice shift and things like this. But when you completely utilize it fully, so you don't start like in the first step, we just send it click IDs and first-party data, but there is no click ID. We don't send first-party data. And in the second one, we're like, okay, let's just see what we have out of everybody who can send it. Let's send as much as we can. And then when we saw, like when we did that, we saw that, for example, demand gen has grown by like 24% versus search has been grown by 5%. So like, okay, this thing is really good for cross-device stitching and probably like understanding impression-based data and how people like with a mid-funnel can interact with mid-funnel campaigns. But the question is, how do you fit that into your attribution? So how do you say like, this actually is really good at understanding what people do outside just clicking, but you will measure it based on the click-based attribution. So this thing doesn't connect with that thing. I honestly, right now, with this like question, I'm like trying to understand how to build a case and how to find the truth, but it's quite difficult.
Yeah, I'm really interested in that. If you get somewhere with that, we might have to get you back on to talk us through, because it's such a big question, isn't it?
It is, and it's the same as MMM question, right? Everybody wants to do MMM, but at the same time, running incrementality and making different budgets and all of that takes a lot of time and a lot of money. And it's also like, it's only going to show that your things are working as good as your creatives are in your landing pages and everything else. Right? If you run not that good of an ad, it's going to show low incrementality and you're like, oh, the channel doesn't work. Well, the channel works. It's just, you need more than one point of a data to make a story. And I think, honestly, that's everybody's problem. It's just very, very difficult. Depending on where your company is in this life cycle of data and measurement, you need to find what works really best and then try to build a story around it.
What has has there been any sort of discernible change in who you've needed, what your what teams look like with this with the shift over from sort of the old world of collecting data and building out with third party cookies to first party data? And I asked that question probably partly from a thinking about security and the additional of needing to hash the data and make sure the data is secure and all the extra governance headaches that might come with first party data. What kind of skills do you need, and has that changed, do you think?
I can only tell what we have internally. Like internally, what we have, obviously legal. I have mentioned it multiple times. So every time you work with it, again, you need to make sure that everything is compliant. But now the next question comes in is the product. And look, we need somebody from the people developing the business, so developers and engineers, to understand why we need that and where it needs to be present. And now we develop new pages, they always need to understand, they have an understanding of it. Like a very common thing, for example, you can come there from SEO pages and they're going to make a permanent redirect. So like this page moved their page, so Google understands that. But this redirect can be implemented with saving gclead and without saving a gclead. And if you do it without saving gclead, you're losing all the information about people coming from Google Ads because you're also losing UTMs and everything else. That particular project, like finding that out that exists in certain pages and fixing that, required quite a lot of investigation because you're trying to find something that physically doesn't show in your data because the data is already lost by the time you're measuring it. Another side of it is because we use this qualified leads concept, is we process data through dbt, so you need to know how to process the data, but also we have a reverse ETL, which is essentially a very simple thing. It takes data from warehouse, sends it to Google Ads. But to do that, somebody needs to read the API documentation. Like, what do we need to send? Can we send that? What came from? Like, it's a very simple set of questions you need to answer. But unless you really know that, you're probably going to go to like ChatGPT and like, okay, there's these 50 fields I need to understand. Which one I actually need it? Which one I can exist? Like, this is where it becomes, I would probably say, quite complicated. It's these nuances.
We had Chad Sanderson on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about data contracts to try and make sure that everything across like every complex bit and every different dependency from the data collection to right the way through to sending the data off to a third party platform, everybody has ownership, understands what they're doing and changing, will downstream affect all of these other things. Do you have do you have any sort of similar processes at Carwow to kind of make sure that everybody is singing from the same hymn sheet and a developer isn't going to change something on a page that fundamentally breaks your tracking and campaigns and everything downstream? Or
Like every rule is written, essentially. Exactly. We do have a lot of ownership, but it did not come as a front thing. Like we broke a few things here and there, and we realized, okay, that cannot change. So the technique, like we have attribution internally that runs in SQL. It's quite a common thing for the companies of our style and size. Uh, that SQL, like we made a mistake once in it, and then every downstream dependency obviously went off the rails. And now we have a testing framework for that. So every time we change, well, you can change anything anywhere else, but if you change anything in there, you have to follow this particular guidance step and make sure that obviously it creates an extra weight you need to pull every time you make the changes. But it's just because you have a cost of improvement versus the cost of failure, you now need to evaluate that. With the product, it was the same thing. There are certain things of the path of the product. So, for example, if there is a funnel, product can change the funnel the way they want, but the final step of the funnel should provide this particular field and this particular information. And if they want to change anything around that, then we have an internal discussion like, okay, what's the implication? I would probably say the most difficult thing for people like in my role is to have that mindset of you want product to change things and you want people to make it better. You just need to always think about how to connect it together, because at some point you might like sidetrack into the thing, oh, I don't want anybody to change anything because I just finished working on it. But that's not true. You do want the funnels to improve, and sometimes it requires certain steps to be go away or certain data to be lost. It just requires to constantly adapt to that.
And how do you manage that? This is a bit more of a technical question, but in terms of that framework, SQL framework, and making sure you got versioning, and are you using like a DBT or a data form to sort of manage
We
your
use DBT.
use DBT? And what was your did you have a choice there to make between data form or DBT, or was it just always DBT is what you went with? I'm just interested because if you got data in BigQuery, what the decision was there?
We don't have a BigQuery, we have Snowflake.
Okay.
Yes. So BigQuery is something I discovered for myself. I absolutely love BigQuery, but we have Snowflake. I think DBT is a very mature product, and when we started migration, when I joined company about 4 years ago, we had a Python. So we still had version controls, but everything was running on Python. And with Python, you don't have this lineage and data tests and everything. The migration is always difficult because you need to move a lot of things and you need to adapt a new way of thinking, but it comes with a lot of benefits. Like I honestly think DBT is one of the best things that's ever existed for my job. I love it, but it comes with a lot of very fun things. So how to orchestrate a very complex things. So for example, my team looks maybe at about 50, 60, 75 tables, and they're all cross-dependent. And how do you make sure which one are important, which one not important? So you start adapting some rules. But just to throw a little bit of less technical thing in it, when it just came in, we're like, we're going to test everything. We're going to do this data engineering driven idea. We're going to test everything. Everything's going to be really good. So we put a lot of tests. And now our two schemas, like two main projects, have about 1.2 thousand tests to run on top. And every test takes time to run on the warehouse. And all of them are not necessarily needed, but you pay for every test. So now we're now at the point where we don't want to test everything. It costs a lot of money. We need to think, what do we actually want to test? And what are those things?
Yeah, that's amazing. 1,200 tests. That is thorough. But yes, I imagine computationally. Yeah, interesting.
How do people, Roman, with everyone, with everything that you're doing and all it, like it sounds like you've got such a great handle on all this, but you're obviously one person within the company and you've got a whole lot of stakeholders. So I asked you earlier about kind of like how you communicate, but kind of flipping that a little bit, how are people consuming data? Like how are your colleagues? Is everything getting kind of funneled into a set of dashboards that people just look at, or is there more of like do you go down more of a self-serve approach, or like how is data actually consumed outside of just your role?
Just to clarify, like I'm not the only one who built all of it, right?
Of course,
like, I'm the one looking for a huge part of it, but it's the team, my team and my colleagues were absolutely amazing in pushing it forward. And yes, we argue a lot about how to orchestrate certain things, but that's where the cool outcome really comes. When it comes to self-serve, I think this is like the very literal problem of every company on the market right now. You have so much data. How do you make it available, and how do you query it? We use everything, like a little bit of everything. We have BI tool. We have predefined reports. We have a specially trained G Sheets. Always G Sheets are the best thing in the world. Uh, but also what I found is that if you build a very specific table and you have a stakeholder that really loves what they do. So for example, if you think about Google Ads, a lot of people that do Google Ads, they know a lot of technical things because you just have to learn all the settings and campaigns. And at some point they open Google Ads scripts and like start to dig into that. I found that it's very easy to give some SQL, predefined SQL you can run because like just for the context, some of the tables that we have are hundreds of million rows and you can't just go and send it to G Sheet. You can't like, but you just need some very narrow scope of data. So I did some internal training for some of the stakeholders to pull the data. Some of the things we do for them because it's a bit too difficult. But we all know where it's going to come, right? With AI and everything, I would imagine in a couple of years, we're going to have a very different conversation.
Yeah, I think that's where my mind was going for the next question. And I'm curious, are people now using, like, are people using code assistant AI tools to, so you said you've given them a bit of SQL. Are they now, are people starting to think, do you know what, I don't need to bother Roman with this. I can just get, Copilot or whatever to write some SQL for me.
I really hope it's going to happen soon. I don't want them to stop bothering me. I absolutely love working with them and I absolutely love helping people. But um, you already can do a lot of things. You can go to ChatGPT, you can go custom GPT, you can upload there the schemas and SQL of your tables and say, you, a code assistant, helps marketing person to do this and this and this. Write SQL in this style, do this and this. And I know that because I did the same thing for Google Ads scripts just a week ago. So if you go there and try to do Google Ads scripts straight away, because it doesn't have enough knowledge, you start to confuse AdWords app with Ads app and just doesn't have enough data. So putting some effort in, we have now a simple agent that didn't take that much time to do that can write really good scripts, like not very complex. I still need to know things. But I did 4 prompts, and in 4 prompts, I got 3 scripts that are working from the first attempt. And I think this is really good.
Yeah, I found. I mean, from a raw LLM perspective, I found over the last sort of 6-7 months the SQL it produces has increased. It has got a lot better quality. Like it used to be, it just didn't know BigQuery SQL, for example, and it would always be just chucking in random functions and transformations that just didn't exist. But now it seems to be getting the context more without me even touching it. And then you've got MCP servers beginning to appear. Like Google released the Google Analytics one the other day, and there's 20 BigQuery ones out there, and GTM, where I imagine there's going to be context baked in with all of the various functions and tools and API calls. But then, that's dangerous because then you're not just giving them the ability to query, you're also giving the ability to run other things as well, potentially. But it is a scary and interesting future, it feels like.
I mean, I think a huge part of a challenge of the job nowadays is to find the time to do things you need to do and not try to play around with GPT. Like, I found the GA4 and I started like try it out and plugged it in this week. And I'm like, this is amazing. Like half a year from now, you will just plug it into Slack and just it's just going to pull the data for you. It's not there quite yet to do it fully because now if you try, I don't know if you tried it. I tried it and you ask it to do it, and like, I messed up the API call. I need to redo it, and it comes like 2-3 times, and eventually it gets it right. But it takes a lot of compute power. But I'm pretty sure that's where we're heading.
Yeah, we found it useful for sort of context building, not necessarily going and taking actions right now, which it can do. Like you say, if you're specific enough, it can go and do it. But I found it useful if I'm just dropping into a container or a Google Analytics instance I've never been in before, and just like, what's going on in here. I found it's good at just giving me a bit of context that would have taken 4 or 5 hours of digging and figuring out within a few minutes of like, okay, I kind of get how their consent's hanging together, or I kind of get like where some problems might be really quickly. But yeah, like you say, 6 months, all bets are off. I don't know what they'll be doing and what they'll be able to do.
My favorite part of using AI is when once you use it like about for like 10 hours or something, right? You start to getting where it gets and what it can do, and start using for more and more and more. You connect to things like Gemini CLI is a like, game changer, and then at some point you're like, I'm a very lazy person by nature. Like if you need to do a very complex thing, you need to ask a lazy person because they will find the easiest way to do it and the way that you don't need to redo it again. So now I'll ask AI to write a context for other things that AI does. And my favorite is go there to Google Advanced Consent Mode, read the documentation, make research, make a page that's going to explain everything that it does. You copy this in a new chat and say, this is the documentation in Google Advanced Consent Mode. Now build me the story for this and this and this. And because it gives the context, like you give it the context of everything, it doesn't guess anymore. Like it still guess because it's a probabilistic model, but you can do it for pretty much everything. Yeah, it's mind-blowing good.
You're not lazy. You're not lazy. You're efficient.
Yes.
Yeah, I need to play with something. We're a bit of a Claude Code contingent at Measure Lab at the minute, but we do like to mix them up, try the different CLIs tools because they are getting better and better. Really, really cool stuff.
I'm using Claude as well for like other projects as well. It's amazing. They have a difference on the context window at the moment, but to be fair, who knows what's going to be in a year from now? Like it's probably going to be a very different world.
Well, I mean, you've absolutely nailed the segue into what my normal sort of final question is, which is if you had to look in a crystal ball, what would be your predictions for I originally, when I first asked this question, said 5 years and realized that's ridiculous. We might all be
It's an
floating around in
eternity.
space in 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like a year, 2 years, what do you see the future of marketing analytics or anything if you wish to be so ambitious?
I don't think that our jobs will stop to exist. I'm not that person who thinks that we're going to get replaced with a robot. I just don't like the concept of a robot. I feel like it's an exoskeleton and it improves what you're doing by tenfold. Uh, I think getting the data and like just producing, like moving things forward is going to be a million times faster. But somebody said, I'm not sure if it was on your podcast or somewhere else I've read, is if you stop it right now, it's going to take another 10 years for people to catch up with what happened. And we're not stopping the progress. I think this is where going to be the biggest challenge. I'm trying right now to educate people how to do the prompt engineering, where to start. Like starting with AI is very difficult. This is so cool that you have like Looker, for example, they now have Gemini built in and they can like do all of that thing. But it really becomes amazing tool only when you start understanding how to structure your prompt and how to work with it. Essentially, it's a different level of programming. Like when I started doing programming, I was doing C and C++, and you need to explain how to get data in, how to get the data out, and all of that things. Now you have Python, like import solution. That's how Python works, right? And now you have ChatGPT and like import Python. And this is just a different level of abstraction that it comes in there.
It's like the ultimate high order language or non-high order language, programming language. I forget which way around it is, but it's just literally just say what you need and it will do it.
I like your optimistic. I was going to say I like your optimistic view. There is obviously a lot of scaremongering, and some people are just talking. Even this week, I think Sam Altman was telling U.S. Congress that certain industries are basically just going to disappear overnight, and there's a lot of this kind of doom mongering around people losing jobs. And maybe some of that will happen, but I like your optimistic view where you're basically saying that it's technology that's there to help us, and if we can learn to use it properly, it's going to reduce some of the repetitive tasks and just make the good quality work that we do even better.
Yeah, and essentially a lot of things like this, right? 10 years ago, we all expected Uber to have a driverless taxis, and we're still not there. I think the real boundary when it might happen, what might happen is that we're just going to hit that physical world realization that to change something in physical world, you need years. Like one of the things that can happen is that it becomes, as more people start using it, it's very energy expensive that you start to lose how much energy you can lose, like you don't have enough capacity to power it to use for everything. And then building another energy plant is taking years. It's not gonna you can't go to ChatGPT and can you add another plant there?
Not
We
yet.
wish, right? Exactly. And that's, I think, is another very big example. Like a lot of things are probably going to stay unchanged, but some jobs are going to change a lot. Like I would imagine everything IT related is going to be very different. But again, Python came in, coding became like way, way easier and cheaper. So what happened? We now have twice as many coders and 10 times as many data scientists instead of doing the opposite.
We've always got plumbing and electricians if we need to really have a backup, just get a trade.
Just need to learn one of those. I guess you built your wall behind you, so you've got some skills. I was just thinking, as a final kind of parting note, Matthew, what we need to do is take everybody's answer to that question that you give. And in the future, which now isn't going to be 5 years, it's probably going to be 5 months, we need to give a prize to whoever had the best prediction. But in all reality, it'll probably all change in 5 weeks, and we won't even have a podcast anymore.
There'll be
We'll just be agents
of our voices.
Yeah, speaking to other AI agents.
Yeah, talking about the podcast, my last, the last thing that I found very fun is you can go to Notebook LM. You did all the preparation for a very complex topic, and can you generate a 5-minute conversation about it, so a person that doesn't know anything about it can listen to the background and have more incentive to go into the topic and help me to solve it. So
yeah, we played around with that. Matthew, didn't you put a GTM container into it or something like that? And it made a podcast, and it sounded like they were really excited, and they're like, "Wow! On today's episode, we're talking about GTM container 123-7 or whatever." It was quite weird.
Yeah, I uploaded the JSON export of a Google Tag Manager container and put it into Notebook LM, and it produced a podcast around it. It was quite a good listen. It got more chemistry than Dara and I, the two virtual.
It's not hard
voices. No,
I mean, I love your podcast.
Oh well, thank you for saying that, Roman, and also because you, there were several other things that we could have talked to you about. I think we'll get you back on again if you're happy to join us again, and we'll cover another topic, and we can look at how your predictions fared as well, maybe.
Yeah, always happy to. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. And look, thank you again for joining us. It's been a great chat. That's it for this week's episode of the Measure Pod. We hope you enjoyed it and picked up something useful along the way. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on so you don't miss future episodes.
And if you're enjoying the show, we'd really appreciate it if you left us a quick review. It really helps more people discover the pod and keeps us motivated to bring back more. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.